Imagine, for just a second, voluntarily putting on a pair of woven gloves.
Okay. Sounds harmless enough so far.
Right, but these gloves are filled with dozens of the world's most venomous ants.
Oh, well. Yeah, no thanks.
And you were doing this on purpose, like in absolutely agonizing pain, simply to make sure you get along better with your neighbors.
It's pretty hard to wrap your head around.
It really is. Well, welcome to the deep dive, everyone. I am thrilled you're here with us today because our mission is to explore this absolutely fascinating piece of anthropological research by J.P. Lindstroth.
It's a fantastic paper.
Yeah, we're looking at how indigenous Amazonian societies, specifically the Satere-Mawe of Brazil, handle human conflict.
Yeah.
We are going to extract some of the most, surprising insights about their peacemaking mechanisms.
I'll tell you, their approach to what they call conviviality is going to make you question literally every single way you handle disputes in your own life.
Totally. It just fundamentally flips the script, right? Like on how we view social friction.
Exactly. Because in our modern framework, we tend to treat conflict like a knot that has to be violently untangled. You go to a courtroom or maybe a tense boardroom.
Right, you battle it out.
Yeah, you have two sides. Somebody wins and somebody loses.
Yeah.
But the societies we are looking at today, they treat harmony not as some polite suggestion, but as a rigid architecture for survival.
And we aren't just looking at ancient history here, are we?
Not at all. We are unpacking a living, breathing social technology that prioritizes peace above almost everything else.
Okay, so let's unpack that architecture. Because the very first major tool these Amazonian societies use is a concept anthropologists refer to as fission.
Fission, yeah.
Which, to put it in everyday terms, basically means if you and your neighbor are having a serious, irreconcilable dispute, one of you just packs up your house, gathers your family, and moves away into the jungle to start an entirely new settlement.
I mean, it is the ultimate creation of psychosocial distance.
Just literally walking away.
Exactly. For many Amazonian groups, the threshold for tolerating dissension is incredibly low. If a quarrel erupts over, say, a romantic rivalry or maybe an accusation of theft, they don't sit around letting that resentment build into violence.
They just leave.
Yeah, the most common culturally sanctioned avoidance strategy is simply mobility. You remove the friction by removing yourself.
Okay, I have to push back on this a little bit, though, because to a modern listener, if you have a fight with a friend or a coworker and you just walk away, block their number, never speak to them again.
We call that ghosting.
Yes, we call it ghosting. We consider that avoiding the problem entirely. In our world, that's, a psychological flaw. Is fission actually resolution, or is it just running away because you don't want to deal with it?
You're entirely right to call that out, because modern psychology absolutely views avoidance as a maladaptive trait. But here's why the Amazonian context completely flips our psychology on its head.
Okay, I'm listening.
In a modern state, we have police, we have judges, we have a centralized authority to basically force a resolution and maintain order.
Right, there's a system in place.
But in traditionally egalitarian Amazonian societies, there is no centralized coercive power. No one has the authority to force you to shake hands and make up.
Oh, that makes sense. So there's no backup plan if things go south.
Exactly. Therefore, maintaining conviviality, which is this intense, almost idealized state of communal harmony and positive social feeling, is quite literally a matter of life and death.
Because if a conflict escalates into physical violence, it threatens to tear apart the entire social fabric of the village.
Precisely. So moving away isn't cowardly ghosting. It's a highly practical pressure release valve designed to literally save lives.
Wow. And it goes way deeper than just moving your physical location, right? The research details how this need for harmony actually alters how they experience human emotions.
It fundamentally changes their emotional categorization, yeah.
Think about the last time you, the listener, were absolutely furious with someone. You probably felt justified, right? You were just in a bad mood.
Sure.
But take the Arope people of Peru. They don't see anger as just a temporary bad mood. They have a specific word for it, goa pain.
Goa pain, yes.
And they view it as a transformational force directly connected to sorcery.
Which is a crucial psychological distinction. For the Arope, if you allow yourself to become intensely, visibly angry, you are no longer considered a true person by your peers.
Wait, really? You lose your personhood?
You do. The emotion literally transforms you into an enemy, an other. You avoid anger at all costs because expressing it isn't just, rude. It is viewed practically as an act of dark magic directed against your own community.
It's a literal poison.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like turning into the Incredible Hulk, but instead of green skin, you get completely socially exiled.
That's a great way to put it.
And to bring this even closer to home, think about how you physically feel when you're stressed about a fight with a friend. Your gut tightens up, right? Oh, definitely. You carry it in your stomach.
Exactly. The Ingzit people of Paraguay take that literal biological feeling and make it the center of their medical worldview. They believe that human emotions physically reside in an organ in the stomach area called the wax sock.
Which is just a brilliant way to somatize social health.
How so?
Well, the Engset believe that if you have bad social relations, like if you're harboring resentment or engaging in petty arguments, this waxock organ becomes hard and locked up.
Like a physical knot in your stomach.
Exactly. And a locked waxock makes you physically dangerously ill. To keep your body healthy, you have to keep your waxock soft and unlocked.
So what's the cure for that?
The only prescription is daily tranquility, emotional restraint, and harmonious living. Your physical well-being is entirely biologically dependent on your social well-being.
Which perfectly sets up my absolute favorite example from this section of the research, the QBO people.
Oh, the headmen. Yes.
Yeah. They have a leader, a headman, but the source points out he has absolutely zero authority to punish anyone. He can't fine you. He can't banish you.
He has no real power in the traditional sense.
None. His entire job description is basically just mood management for equilibrium. He is essentially a modern workplace HR mediator who has no power to actually fire anyone, but is desperately running around the office trying to keep the vibes positive.
That HR mediator analogy is remarkably accurate. The QBO headman relies entirely on tact, persuasion, and the prestige of his office.
Just putting out emotional fires.
Right. His sole function is to soothe outraged feelings and privately smooth over difficulties before they fester.
It's fascinating.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, all of these groups, the Aeropai with their fear of sorcery, the Engzit with their stomach organs, the QBO with their mood managers, they're all showing us that in the Amazon, peace isn't just the absence of war.
It's an active practice.
It is an active, daily, psychological, and highly physical practice.
But how do you keep a community together if their primary pressure valve is just walking away?
Right.
Like, if fission is always an option, you need something incredibly powerful to bind people to one another in the first place. You absolutely do.
Here's where it gets really interesting. To truly understand how deep this commitment to group cohesion goes, we have to look closely at the Satere-Mawe of Brazil. And the way they build their social fabric involves intense mythology and honestly excruciating physical pain.
It seems like a massive contradiction at first glance,
Oh,
right?
totally.
A society that values peace and conviviality above all else, yet centers its core identity on a profoundly violent origin myth and a highly agonizing initiation rite.
The origin myth itself is so cinematic. In the primordial world, there's a woman named Onyamuasabe. She has a magical snake lover, gets pregnant, and gives birth to a son.
A very classic mythological setup.
Yeah, but then her own brothers, who are jealous shamans, ambush and murder the child. They completely dismember him.
It's incredibly dark.
It is. But the mother finds the body, buries it, and from the child's buried eyes sprouts the very first guarana plant.
And guarana, for those who might not know, is a highly caffeinated berry. You'll see it everywhere in Brazil today, mostly in commercial energy drinks.
Right, you can buy it at any grocery store now.
Exactly. But for the Satere-Mawe, it is deeply sacred. They consider themselves the literal children of Guarana. The myth establishes a cosmology where violence and jealousy, specifically between family members, lead to unthinkable tragedy.
But it ultimately results in the creation of their defining cultural artifact.
Yes, this unifying symbol of their identity.
But the real shocker is how they traditionally prepare their young men for this world. Remember those ant gloves I mentioned at the very start?
I can never forget them.
It's a ritual called the Tucandeira dance. Adolescent boys are required to wear special gloves woven out of palm fronds. And trapped inside the weave of these gloves are dozens of live bullet ants.
The Parapanera clavata. It is widely documented by entomologists as having one of the most agonizing stings of any insect on Earth.
Just the name bullet ant says it all.
Seriously. The venom contains a neurotoxin that causes extreme, debilitating muscle contractions and a burning sensation that lasts for hours.
And these boys don't just put the gloves on for a quick second. They have to endure this ritual up to 20 times throughout their youth to be considered full men, ready for marriage and leadership.
20 times?
Yeah, up to 20 times. The text notes that the ants are placed with their stingers facing inward toward the skin. The boys have to dance rhythmically alongside the men of the village while this venom is literally coursing through their arms.
That is just intense.
It is the most extreme, terrifying, team-building exercise imaginable. It makes a modern corporate trust fall look like an absolute joke.
It really does. And historically, there was a very pragmatic, survivalist reason for this.
Like what?
Well, in the past, the Satere-Mawe engaged in regular internecine warfare, fighting amongst themselves and defending territory from neighboring tribes. The ritual was meant to annihilate them, physically and mentally, turning them into fearless warriors who could withstand any hardship.
But wait, if they're preparing to fight amongst themselves, what happens to the whole conflict avoidance and conviviality thing? Doesn't a warrior culture contradict the pursuit of peace?
That tension is exactly why the ritual is so vital. Anthropologists call this mechanism an imagistic mode of religiosity.
Wait, imagistic mode of what?
Imagistic mode of religiosity. Let me break that down. Instead of learning your society's rules from reading a book or listening to a sermon, which is a doctrinal approach, this society uses an unforgettable, high-adrenaline, intensely sensory image.
Ah, I see. The pain is the lesson.
Exactly. The agonizing, shared pain of the bullet ant permanently burns a collective identity into your brain. Going through such a violent ordeal together creates an incredibly powerful psychological bond.
Like trauma bonding.
Yes, it builds a shared trauma and internal resilience that binds the social fabric together. It's a psychological mechanism that essentially says, we have suffered the venom of the bullet ant together. Our petty daily arguments over a stolen tool or a slight insult are trivial by comparison.
Wow.
It enforces cohesion in a world that is constantly threatening to fracture.
So you have this intense trauma bonding to keep the community glued together. But what happens when that isn't enough? Like when a severe dispute bubbles up that the memory of the bullet ants just can't fix?
Right, because everyday friction still happens.
Exactly. Historically, the Satere-Mawe had a very specific physical tool for conflict resolution. It was a sacred wooden club called the Puritim.
The Puritim is a magnificent artifact. It's shaped like a paddle, over 4 feet long, carved from dense wood, and completely inscribed with intricate geometric designs.
And those designs aren't just for decoration.
Not at all. In their cosmology, those specific patterns represent the moral law of the universe. The carvings dictate that all that is good is on one side and all that is bad is on the other.
And when two people were fighting, the leader of the village, the Tuxo, would bring out this paddle. The disputants would sit down, they would drink a ceremonial grated guarana beverage called sapo, and the leader would essentially read the moral text from the paddle.
It's a very formal mediation process.
Yeah, he would trace the geometric lines to help them reach a consensus. It was a physical, tangible anchor for their peace process.
It externalized the moral authority. The leader isn't just giving his personal opinion or scolding them. He is interpreting the literal law of the universe carved in wood to restore harmony.
It totally removes the ego from the mediation.
Exactly. But we also see how incredibly fragile that system actually was in the face of modern history.
Yeah, the disruption hits them hard. Waves of colonization, the violent rubber boom in the Amazon, and eventually the arrival of Christian missionaries, specifically evangelicals and Seventh-day Adventists in the mid-20th century.
A massive cultural collision.
And this completely rewires their entire conflict resolution operating system.
The deep knowledge of how to read that mythic geometric language on the Puritan was slowly lost as the traditional elders passed away. But human cultures are endlessly adaptable.
So what do?
The evangelical missionaries recognized the power of the paddle and essentially told the Satere-Mawe that the Puritan was analogous to the Bible. They took the traditional practice of reading the wooden paddle to solve a fight and seamlessly swapped it for reading Christian scripture.
It's incredible. They literally swapped out the physical object of peacemaking for a new text, a new book, but they kept the underlying cultural goal of resolving the dispute through a shared sacred authority.
They preserved the mechanism even if the object changed.
But the missionaries didn't stop at the paddle. They also heavily targeted the bullet ant ritual. The research notes that many converted Satere-Mawe now view the Tucandeira dance as a literal sin.
Which is a huge shift in worldview.
Right, because if you adopt the belief that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit, allowing yourself to be pumped full of insect neurotoxin is a severe pollution of that temple.
And this reveals the hidden causality of cultural disruption. By convincing the Satere-Mawe to abandon the ant dance, the missionaries didn't just stop a painful practice. They accidentally removed the fundamental trauma bonding mechanism that kept the community resilient.
They took away the glue.
Exactly. Without the shared visceral experience of enduring the venom together, the community was forced to rely entirely on theological belief and the Bible to maintain their unity. In the harsh environment of the Amazon, relying solely on a doctrine rather than a deeply ingrained physical bond proved to be a much more fragile system.
So the traditional mechanisms were fragmented.
Yes, even though their deep-seated psychological drive to avoid conflict remained.
And that deeply ingrained drive gets put to the ultimate test when we look at a massive shift in their spatial reality. Starting in the 1970s and 80s, due to severe food shortages, lack of resources, and environmental damage on their indigenous reserves, many Satere-Mawe were forced to migrate.
They had to leave the forest.
Yeah, they moved from the vast, open interior of the Amazon to the sprawling, concrete, urban metropolis of Manaus.
Which fundamentally shatters the spatial dynamics of everything we've discussed so far.
Because there's nowhere to run.
Exactly. In a densely packed city of millions living in crowded hillside neighborhoods, the traditional pressure valve of fission is completely gone. You can't just pack up your house and move your village away from your rival anymore. You are permanently stuck next to each other.
So how do urban indigenous leaders manage conflict today when walking away is physically impossible? The research gives us a fascinating real-world case study of 3 rival Satere-Mawe leaders currently living in Manaus.
It's a brilliant modern application of these old principles.
Watching them operate plays out exactly like a modern municipal city council dispute. You have Waldir, Paulo, and Soraya.
3 very different leaders utilizing 3 entirely different strategies to navigate the intense friction of urban indigenous politics.
Let's start with Waldir. Waldir is the activist. He is all about direct action. When his people desperately needed healthcare rights, he didn't rely on gentle conviviality or avoiding the conflict.
He took a very different route.
He actually led an organized invasion of the federal building for the National Indian Foundation, or FUNASA. He is willing to actively escalate a situation, create a massive disruption, and confront authority head-on to get resources for his people.
Waldir represents a stark departure from traditional avoidance. He recognized that in the concrete jungle, invisibility is dangerous. He is deliberately adopting the political friction of the metropolis.
Using their own weapons against them.
Yes, using the city's own tactics, protests, occupations to secure survival. But then you have Paulo, who is arguably the most complex and controversial figure in this case study.
Paulo is like the slick PR mayor of his neighborhood. He actively avoided the FUNASA conflict. He thought there were much better, quieter ways to handle things without burning tires in the street and making enemies.
The completely opposite approach.
Paulo's entire strategy is about public relations, harmonization, and blending in, especially with the non-indigenous neighbors in Manaus. And to achieve this, he made a massively controversial move.
This is where it gets really divisive.
He took that sacred, agonizing Tucandeira bullet ant ritual and he secularized it.
He fundamentally transformed its entire mechanism and purpose. Paulo organized a modified version of the dance for the Day of the Indian, where urban tourists could actually buy tickets to come watch.
And the craziest part, he made it painless.
Right.
The young initiates didn't actually wear the venomous gloves. The gloves were worn on the outside of the hands by dancers purely as a visual, theatrical spectacle.
So why do that? Why take your most sacred, painful rite of passage and water it down into a painless, ticketed tourist show?
Yeah, it sounds like selling out.
It does, but Paulo is using conflict avoidance as a brilliant macro-political strategy. He realized that the urban, non-indigenous society of Manaus might view the real, agonizing ritual as savage, frightening, or backward.
Right, they wouldn't understand it.
Exactly. By making it a safe, colorful public spectacle, he is making his people acceptable and palatable to the wider metropolitan society. He is actively combating the racism and discrimination his people face by harmonizing his community's image with the expectations of the city.
So he's modifying his own deep culture to avoid conflict with the outside world.
Precisely.
Which brings us to our third leader, Soraya. And Soraya is the grassroots community organizer. She runs a women's association called AMI, where 70 different families gather on an urban hillside to make and sell traditional artisanal jewelry.
It's incredible initiative.
But it's not just an economic business, it's essentially a safe space. It is a micro-village built right in the middle of the city where women can converse, share resources, and critically maintain their native language and intercultural life.
And Soraya's perspective on Paulo's tourist ritual is starkly different from his. She views the secularization of the bullet ant dance as a profound sacrilege.
Oh, she hates it.
Yeah, she sees it as a deep violation of their indigeneity, a selling out of their soul, just to appease the outside metropolitan world.
But here is the brilliant, uniquely Amazonian part of Soraya's strategy. She thinks what Paulo is doing is terrible, but she never actually confronts him about it.
No, she employs the purest form of traditional conflict avoidance available in the city.
Just ignoring him.
Exactly. Instead of engaging in a bitter public feud with Paulo that would fracture the fragile urban Satere-Mawe community even further, she focuses all of her energy inward. She simply ignores him.
That is so true to the original concept of fission.
It is. She protects the inner life of her community through the daily, quiet work of the Women's Association. Paulo uses avoidance to blend into the metropolis. Soraya uses avoidance to build a protective wall against it. Both leaders are passionately pursuing peace for their people, but their definitions of what peace requires and how to achieve it are completely opposed.
It is a masterclass in human adaptation. Which really brings us to the end of our journey today. We started out deep in the Amazon basin, unpacking the logistical reality of fission and the Angset people constantly monitoring their wax-sucked stomach organs to prevent bad vibes from making them sick.
A long journey from the jungle to the city.
For sure. We explored the visceral, trauma-bonding pain of the bullet ant gloves and the sacred geometry of the Puritan paddle, and we followed that thread all the way to the municipal politics of a modern city, watching leaders navigate PR, protests, and cultural preservation.
And I think the core takeaway woven through all of these diverse sources is that conviviality, true. Lasting peace is never a passive state. It is not just sitting back, relaxing, and hoping people get along.
It's hard work.
It requires active, sometimes exhausting effort. It requires constant psychological management, immense cultural adaptation, and sometimes enduring shared hardships to forcefully remind us of our common humanity.
And that's exactly what I want you, the listener, to think about as you go about your week. When tension inevitably arises at work or when you get into a dispute at home, what is your default setting?
Do you immediately default to the modern courtroom model?
Right. Do you try to build a bulletproof argument so you can logically win the fight? Or do you try to act a bit more like a QBO headman? Do you manage the mood, swallow your pride, and actively prioritize the long-term health of the relationship over the short-term victory of being right?
And I will leave you with this final, completely different avenue to ponder. We've spent this entire deep dive talking about physical spaces moving through the vast jungles to achieve fission, or being trapped together in the concrete neighborhoods of Menes. But think for a moment about our modern digital world. The algorithms that power our social media platforms are literally built on the exact opposite of Amazonian conviviality.
Whoa, absolutely. They thrive on conflict.
They are designed to monetize our anger. They prevent digital fission by trapping us in endless, algorithmic, argumentative threads we can't look away from. If the Aerope people believe that expressing anger literally transforms you into a monster and an enemy of your community, what exactly is our digital architecture turning us into? Think about that the next time you log on.
A perfect question to leave us with. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.